All right, welcome. My name is Jordan Estock, and I'm sharing today a project that I've been working on for the last 3 years. It's part of my action research to fulfill my dissertation requirements with Wilmington University. Um, the title of my study is Impact of High School Female Role Models on 8th Grade Girls' Decision to Pursue Engineering. And I'm going to share with you kind of how I got started, my action research plan, and then the results at the end to show what we learned from our action research. Just a little bit of background. I am an engineering teacher at Concord High School, and I've been teaching there for 10 years now, and I started my doctorate program at WilmU 3 years ago in 2017. So around the same time that I was looking for my problem of practice to be the focus of my dissertation for Wilmington University, the district had and the state of Delaware Department of Education had recently partnered with NAEP, the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity, and the CFO of NAEP, Dr. Mimi Lufkin, and the supervisor of STEM and curriculum instruction, Dr. Michelle Kutch. They were working together, and they were looking to look at some equity problems in the Brandywine School District. And one of the things that they were looking at was the gender imbalance found within the high school engineering programs at the Brandywine School District. And being an engineering teacher in the Brandywine School District, I found this problem kind of the perfect storm. I had an interest in it. It affected me. I also had some opportunity to have some influence on the problem since it was, so close to home. It dealt with my class. I didn't have to be an administrator to have an impact on the problem. I felt I could influence this problem pretty well just being a classroom teacher. So I thought it was perfect timing to jump on board and kind of be one of the leaders of this problems and lead the action research, not only for my dissertation at WilmU, but to also, in turn, help the district. So the problem of practice really centered around the fact that the Brandywine School District high school engineering programs average less than one female for every 5 males in our engineering classes. And just to put that into perspective, the Perkins 2020 goal is 25% female, and the Perkins 2023 goal is 35% female. And we'll look just exactly where the Brandywine School District stands below those goals in just a minute. These charts show these tables show the last 5 years, the enrollment at each high school. You can see on the left-hand side the school year. The center column shows how many girls compared to how many total people in the class, and the far right column shows the percentage of females enrolled that year. And this is just in the level 1 classes for that particular school year. So over the last 4 years, Brandywine High School has averaged 14% females in their level 1 engineering classes. Same chart for Concord High School. Get myself out of the way here. The same setup, and you can see over the last 5 years, Concord's averaged slightly higher than Brandywine at 18% female, with a kind of an unexplainable spike in 18-19, that 30%. We hadn't really even started our efforts yet of trying to increase females, but we ended up using this to really help us, and we'll talk about that later too. That 18-19 school year spike ended up being part of our action research plan. But you can still see we're well below the Perkins 2020 goal and the Perkins 2023 goal of 25 and 35%. And the next table is Mount Pleasant's data. Again, the last 5 years. Their data is significantly higher than Brandywine and Concord's. And one of the reasons for that is they have the IB program there. So any girl that's part of the IB program, design engineering level 1 is actually a requirement at Mount Pleasant. So that is a reason, or I guess a potential cause for why Mount's numbers are higher than Brandywine and Concord's, where at Brandywine and Concord, engineering is just an elective class, where at Mount, It's still an elective class, but any girls that are and boys that are in the IB program, they actually have to take design engineering level 1. So that's why their numbers look slightly higher. You can see 22% at Mount Pleasant. So some of the literature that really helped guide our research and our action plan were these three things. Peers and role models were a big part of our solution, as well as stereotype inoculation model, which we'll get into a little bit later, and self-efficacy also played a big part. So these three topics really drove a lot of our decisions in terms of how we wanted to design our solution to this problem. Our aim statement was to increase the number of females enrolling in design engineering level 1 across all 3 district high schools by 7% in the 2021 school year. And that's compared to the district average of 18% over the last 5 years. So if you look at those three tables from Brandywine, Concord, and Mount over the last 5 years and averaged all of our numbers together, the district was averaging 18% female enrollment in their level 1 classes. And that 7% goal that we were targeting, wasn't just pulled out of thin air. If we got that 7% by 2021, that would put us at the Perkins goal for the 2020-21 school year, which was 25%. So that's where that 7% came from. So this was really our goal, to see if our solution was effective or not. So how do we solve this problem? Well, we ended up designing these middle school assemblies, we called them, and they were structured to last 1 hour. And we broke that hour into really 2 parts. There was a 15-minute general session, and we invited all of the 8th grade girls from the middle school to the auditorium. We just told them why we were there. We brought with us a student panel from the high schools. So all 3 high schools went to 1 middle school, and each high school brought with them about anywhere from like 5 to 12 high school girls that were currently enrolled in the engineering program. And this was a big part of our methodology, which we'll get into later. And if you think back to that slide about the role models and the peers, this student panel really served as that. So that general session, we just kind of had all the girls up front. The high school girls were seated or standing up front. All the 8th grade girls got pulled out of their classes. We sat them down in the auditorium. We had that unified front of all the girls together. We weren't trying to sell them like Brandywine versus Concord versus Mount. We were just trying to show them, no matter what engineering or no matter what high school you choose, we're going to welcome you girls with open arms into our engineering classes and treat you fairly. So we weren't really like cannibalizing each other's girls. We were really trying to just sell the whole district. So that message was said at the general session. We also showed them a video that was district made. We used high school girls and Mount Pleasant's audio engineering program to help build like a 2-minute video about girls in engineering. We had a trifold brochure that was given to the girls as they walked in. And we also invited a guest speaker in our general session, which was someone who was female, a professional in the engineering industry in some shape or form. And that session lasted about 15 to 20 minutes. Then after that session, all the 8th grade girls were split into 3 breakout sessions, and that was based on their feeder pattern. So all the girls that were planning to go to Brandywine, they would break out and go to the cafeteria. All the girls that were going to Concord, they would break out and go to the library. And all the girls that were going to Mount Pleasant, they would remain in the auditorium. So that's how the breakout sessions were divided. And then those breakout sessions were much different. So I guess you could say the general session was a little more formal. The breakout session was really led by the student panel. Each breakout session was slightly different. By design, really, to be honest, we wanted to kind of have a different strategy or format of each breakout session, just slightly different. and then kind of debrief after that. Each breakout session was run by one of the high school engineering teachers from that high school. So Dr. Judd Wagner ran Brandywine School District's breakout session. Mrs. Heather Handler ran Mount Pleasant's, and I ran Concord's. But again, we were just like the facilitator in the room of those breakout sessions. We really turned it over to our student panels. And like I said, each breakout session was slightly different. We'll talk about some of the different things that went on in each session. But mainly, you had the high school girls who were there to have a formal question and answer session, as well as informally interact with the 8th grade girls. And originally, we went into this as like a recruiting effort, but we'll talk more about how that kind of changed as we got deeper into these assemblies. The other thing that went on in the breakout session was we brought with us as many like projects and artifacts, and in some cases even activities, to give the middle school girls a chance to kind of get a feel for what a high school engineering class looks like and feels like. So our first assembly, we called our pilot assembly, and that happened at Tally Middle School in June 2019. And I'll have some data in just a minute to show you how that assembly went. And then because of the success we felt we had at our pilot assembly, we ended up having a series of 3 more assemblies in 2020 to hit all 3 of our district middle schools. We felt that the pilot proved that this was a viable concept, and now we want to replicate this. And I'll share some data as well, not only just from the pilot, but also from the series of the 3 assemblies that happened this year. And notice the date of the pilot compared to the dates of the 2020 assemblies. We'll talk about that too as well, which ended up making a pretty big difference. So from that Tally assembly, the really only thing we collected, we asked them a question at the end of the assembly that asked them to self-identify with one of 4 possible responses. So after the general session was over, after the breakout session was over, our hours coming to an end, every breakout session asked the students the same question, and it was basically worded, after taking part in this assembly, which response best describes you? And the maverick response, we came up with that name, is someone who really didn't need the assembly. They were going to take engineering regardless, and this assembly, they didn't need this to help sell them. They were going to go into engineering before this assembly. No matter how this assembly went, they were going to take engineering when they got to high school. Those are the mavericks. We also had the anti-mavericks, so the opposite of that. Those are the girls that are, I don't care what you said in this assembly. I have no interest in doing this. I'm never going to take engineering. I got my mindset on a different elective already. And then the other 2 were pretty interesting. There's talked out of it. Those were girls that felt like, yeah, I was thinking about taking engineering before this assembly, but now that I've got a better feel for what it is, I don't think that's for me anymore. And then there's the last group, the group we were most interested in. We call those girls converted. And those were girls that went into this assembly thinking that engineering was not for them. But at the end of the assembly, they decided, you know what, I think I'm going to take this next year. I want to sign up for level 1 engineering for my freshman year. And you can see out of 89 girls that completed the survey, these are the percentages. The highest one we were happy to see was converted. I mean, that's what we were there to do. We were trying to get more girls to take engineering. And we'll talk about what this number actually looked like in terms of truly converting these girls into engineering. And you can see the mavericks and the anti-mavericks kind of balance each other out, and talked out of it was a small percentage. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing to be talked out of it. I think the assembly is still doing something valuable there in terms of redirecting these girls to take a pathway that's more suitable for them, rather than finding out, engineering was not the pathway they really wanted. Okay, so out of the 89 girls that were surveyed, this chart really shows the attrition we experienced in trying to get these girls into engineering, and then passed that into level 2. So 89 girls were surveyed. Out of those 89 girls, we had 41 identify themselves as converted girls, but only 13 of those 41 ended up getting into our engineering level 1 class in this current school year that we're in right now. And then of those 13 girls that are in level 1 now, they were surveyed again about halfway through the school year, and only 5 of them could say that, yes, I'm definitely taking level 2 next year. 2 said they were on the fence, and 2 said they were not going to do it anymore, and 6 of them said that they were on the fence still. So there's certainly some future research to be done in how can we, get more of these 41 girls, not only here in level 1, but also, to continue on into the pathway. So this is the self-identified responses that we talked about earlier. They're color-coded because the next couple charts are going to stick to this color code, so you kind of have a feel for what you're looking at. So remember, the mavericks were the ones that were taking it anyway. Converteds were the ones that we influenced enough for them to think they want to sign up. The talked out of it decided, engineering is not for me. And the anti-mavericks, we were never going to win them over regardless. So this chart shows the data from all 3 assemblies. So this shows Tally, Springer, MPS. This is no longer the pilot. We learned from the pilot. We went back and did the assemblies again. And our numbers shook out like this. So we got about half the girls out of, I need to include my N on here. Let's see. It's like 346. Close to half or over half the girls identified as converted, which is really encouraging. But again, I'm not sure we solved that problem of getting them into level 1 from here. Like, what's this 185 going to shake down to? And you can see a little bit higher on the anti-maverick side. And that could be because we took a bit of a different stance. In the beginning, these were certainly looked at as engineering recruitment assemblies. And we really started to drop that recruitment, stigma and think of it more as like an informational, just general information. We were still promoting engineering, but at the same time, we were okay if you weren't going to take engineering. We wanted to direct these girls to the pathway that they really wanted. So some of our language may have changed in our messaging, and I guess it wasn't so gung-ho, like we got to have all these girls get into our program. So that could be some, reason for how the data turned out the way it did. So the other thing we also started to collect, this was a look at each middle school. So you can see from our Tally 2020 assembly, here's the number of converted girls, the Springer assembly, the number of converted girls, and again, the PS DuPont number of converted girls. You can see kind of an interesting trend. The converted girls kind of started to slow down, and the anti-mavericks started to increase. Again, not sure what to attribute that to. It could have been some of our messaging, or it could have just been the demographics of the school. Something that future research can certainly take a look at. The other thing we started looking closer at was the impact of certain elements. So we wanted to know what about these assemblies was really turning girls on to take level 1 when they got to high school. So we looked at, was it the video? Was it the trifold brochure? The guest speakers we were inviting? Was it meeting the high school teachers? Did that have any impact? Was it the high school girls we were bringing with us? Was it the projects and the artifacts that we were showcasing? Or was it the activity that the high school girls were leading the middle school girls through? And we tried to kind of put our finger on which one of these things is the most impactful and how can we give them more of that in the future. So this shows, again, this is data from the 3 2020 assemblies. You can see overwhelmingly the high school girls had the biggest impact. and that's not just from the converted girls. Like, these are all four groups of girls saying that the high school girls had the biggest impact. A close second was the projects. So they did like to see the things that were, what am I going to do if I do take this class? That was important to them. But without a doubt, the most important thing was the interaction with the high school girls, which again goes back to what the literature said about the peers and the role models. And the close, or I guess in third, would be the guest speaking portion. Again, lending itself to the research about the role models and experts in the field. So this shows the favorite part of the assembly based on the self-identified response. And it's pretty neat how each one kind of shook out very similar regardless of the self-identified response. So you can see the blue and the gold in each self-identified response shows that the two most influential parts were the high school girls and the projects. Interesting to see that the ones that were talked out of it put the most stock into the high school girls. So they really valued their opinions, which I found interesting. Things that weren't as effective across the board were the video, the teachers themselves, and the guest speaker not so much. I found it interesting. We took this data point. We didn't take it personally. We actually used that a lot in terms of, they don't care what the teachers have to say. Let's say our small piece, get out of the way, and let these high school girls take over and send the message for us. So we did use that a lot throughout these assemblies. So we're excited to see what happens for the 2021 school year. We just did these assemblies in February and January. So we're interested to see how they shake out. We can't truly say that we're still not getting all of these converted girls yet. The only assembly to have been seen all the way through to those girls to get to high school was our 2019 Tally pilot assembly. So I'm anxiously awaiting to see what the numbers look like when we look at the 2021 school year. In terms of timing, I mentioned that being an issue. What course selection typically happens around March or April, I guess in some cases maybe May, and we hadn't gotten to the girls by then in our original 2019 pilot assembly. We were still, or they had done their course selection, then we did our assembly. So one of the reasons why our converted drop-off rate may have happened is we had to go back and change some of those girls' schedules. And if that changing didn't happen or rescheduling didn't happen, it presented some challenges into getting those girls into the class. So it was nice about our 2020 assemblies, and this wasn't by mistake, this was by design, or wasn't by chance, it was by design. We made sure to run those 3 assemblies prior to the course selection happening. So we'll see how that shakes out come next school year. The other thing that was important, I mentioned myself took the lead on the project for the district, but it was important to have a point person at each high school. So Dr. Judd Wagner for Brandywine and Mrs. Heather Handler from Mount. But not only that, every middle school that welcomed us, I made sure I had a point person at each of those middle schools to help with some of the logistics. So at PS, we had Mr. Stephen Lee. At Springer, we had Miss Bonnie Wilson. And at Tally, we had Miss Jenny Copson. So big help from them. But the 6 of us really made this come together. It was important to have someone on the inside of the middle schools to make these happen. Other implications, if there's other underrepresented CTE programs, such as Early Childhood Teacher Academy program, I think they have the reverse gender imbalance as the engineering. So they have mostly girls and very few boys. We could potentially run a congruent, simultaneous assembly where all the girls are pooled for the engineering and all the boys are pooled to another area for the Early Childhood Teacher Academy, and really just kind of run the same format. Any subject could do this. They could have their own panel. The Early Childhood could use boys currently in the pathway to help sell their program. And and it really could lead to like a all subjects using this approach. I think it's important that they hear from the high school girls what the pathway is all about, and I think the high school girls' voices go much further and resonate much deeper with the middle school girls than the teacher voices do. Um, I think the maverick and converted awareness. Um, I forget what I meant by that. Maverick and converted awareness. Um, I think I just meant that now that we're building, um, we're building our programs up. It was important to have the Mavericks on board with this message. Like I mentioned, the 30% spike in the Concord enrollment from the 18-19 school year, and that was like an unexplainable spike. Um, we used that 30%. I think it was like close to 24 girls. They became our original group of Mavericks, and we used those girls as a focus group to help drive a lot of our decisions for these assemblies. So we asked them things like, what did you think about the program? What were some misconceptions you had? Um, why do you think you ended up in engineering? Like, what was the biggest reason that led you to be here? So that big cohort of girls that came to Concord in the 18-19 school year, we interviewed them a lot to help us prepare for this, this round of assemblies. And now that we have kind of built this awareness up, we can continue to tap into those Mavericks at the high school level. And the impact of our high school girls' voice, I mentioned this already, it just resonates so much more than the high school teacher. And the data shows it. Like when we saw that data, we knew we had to get ourselves off the stage early and get the high school girls in front of these middle school girls as much as possible. Some things to think about for future dates or for future work. For future assemblies, it's important to secure the dates. Like nothing can happen until the dates are secured. And this might not sound like a big deal, but the middle school principals initially really balked at the idea of us coming to their schools. They felt it was, pretty much a major disruption. It's hard to find times in the school year where we're not affecting testing windows. So I do want to thank the middle school principals for letting us in. And as soon as those dates are secured, then the high schools can really get the ball rolling. The middle school doesn't have to do much. But as soon as those dates are nailed down, then we can start getting plans and field trips and stuff in motion. We were up against some pretty serious transportation issues, which ended up almost canceling our assemblies this year. We found out about 2 or 3 weeks prior to our assemblies that the district couldn't support our buses at the times we needed. So we ended up having to use outside busing. And even they had a hard time accommodating us. And we just needed one bus for all 3 high schools. We needed one bus. And that was almost like the straw that broke the camel's back. Without transportation, we were scrambling. Well, what's our plan B going to be? Can we drive ourselves to these schools? How are we going to get all the high school girls there? So that was definitely an unexpected challenge. I thought we could just sign up for a bus from Brandywine School District and off we went. But that ended up being an unexpected hurdle. I mentioned earlier the use of recruiting language. I could see how this could become somewhat, I guess, troublesome or have some tension between programs. Why does engineering get to go and recruit and business and marketing can't go and recruit? So if you get away from that recruiting language and also, other programs aren't seeing the gender imbalance that we're seeing. So that does give you some leverage, but besides that leverage point, I think it's important to be more, I guess, informational than recruitment. One thing that we learned is that our high school girls would benefit from some more prep time, and now really this is twofold. More prep time in the sense of, the day of the assembly. It'd be nice to have more than 5 minutes to scramble and put your stuff together before the middle school girls walk into your breakout session. So that was one area where we needed more prep time. The other one is like bigger picture. Before we even come to the middle schools, I think we should have some sort of like message unification or some sort of pep rally, just to let these high school girls know like how important their message is and what their message should be. Not trying to script them at all, but just making sure we're all on the same page in terms of what our mission is. There should be some like pre-assembly for the high school girls that are going to the middle schools. And the last thing is the activity versus projects and artifacts. So Brandywine did a really good job in their breakout session of being the one program that actually had some sort of activity for the girls to do. Mount and Concord both relied on the projects and the artifacts. It'd be interesting for future research to look at I guess the self-identified responses. How are these converted girls shaking out versus talked out of it? If all the girls do an activity versus just look at like projects and artifacts. And I think that's it. Are there any questions?
I do have a question about the girls. What do you think the biggest impact on the middle school girls was with the high school girls' message? What messaging do you think had the biggest impact on their decision? Did you do any analysis of that?
My thoughts are just the fact that they see a high school girl in the program is like more than half the battle. Like that's that whole stereotype inoculation model that was mentioned in the lit review piece. When girls see other girls are doing this, it makes it less scary. Like it makes it feel more comfortable. And I'm not saying that what they said didn't have a say on it, but I think what was more important was just the fact that they could see that the middle school girls could see an actual high school. Look at all these high school girls that are doing this. Maybe I could do this. I initially thought it was all just for boys, but I think just that physical message sent by seeing the girls was important.
Okay. Like identifying themselves as
like that. I can see some of myself in this panel.
Okay. So it wasn't so much of what the girls were saying to them about what they liked or didn't like or what it meant to them. You think it was more just the role model?
Yeah, because a lot of that honestly was unpoliced. Like for example, Concord's breakout session, actually all of them had like stations around the room where high school girls are, I hate to use the word unsupervised, but like talking to the middle school girls without a teacher over their shoulder, listening to every word. So I honestly couldn't tell you everything that was talked about, but most of what was shared was just personal experiences in the pathway.
Well, that's good. That answers my question. So it was kind of, it was more of informal, like you said, not scripted.
Yeah, there was a scripted question and answer session, but honestly, that ended up getting like shorter and shorter as we did the assemblies because we felt that the informal interactions were more valuable.